But eventually we got to Gibraltar and she went into dry dock there and we spent a couple of weeks with the Dudell in dry dock. They cleaned the bottom of the ship and painted it and did all the repairs that were necessary to the engine. And of course we were allowed to go ashore. We could go to the pubs and have a beer. We were able to go to the top of the rock and see if we could see any of the monkeys that were reputed to live on the rock. And I think there is an old legend that Britain will lose Gibraltar when the monkeys leave the rock. We were also able to swim on the beaches there. And the other thing I did there was to go inside the rock. The rock is hollowed out with caverns and tunnels, and there are full-sized, quite large machine shops and workshops in these caverns, and stores, big storerooms, and offices. And the whole working of the large naval port there, the British naval port, can be run from inside the rock in case of enemy air attack and all that sort of thing. So I was lucky to, we needed something for the boats and I got the job of going to get it, and I had to go to one of the machine shops inside the rock. But we left Gibraltar and set sail out of the Mediterranean, and didn't know where it was going. Of course, just the ratings. Which way would she go? Would she go left and go back to Freetown, which none of us wanted to do, or would she turn right and head back for the UK? And lots of sighs of relief when she turns to starboard and heads up towards the Irish Channel. And I think we're just about inside of Ireland when it started to rain. And it seems to do that. You get good sunny weather, Mediterranean weather perhaps, although you can have quite a few gales and very rough water in the Bay of Biscay, of course. But anyway, we got the usual drizzle going up through the Irish Channel and up the Clyde to the tail of the bank. Right. Again, my lucky star shone for me, and I returned to Inverary. One of the first things I did on return to Quebec was to put in an application for my promotion. I'd become 21 years of age in May 41, on the 23rd of May, and from that date I was entitled to promotion to a petty officer. I was also qualified to be a chief motor mechanic, which I couldn't be until I was 21. And when the approval came back, they made me a petty officer on the 23rd of May, and the 24th of May I was given the rank of chief motor mechanic. So that was great. I'd made some progress. I had some back pay to come, of course, because this was in sort of getting on into the year, and 1942, and the other thing I was able to do, of course, was to put through my application for a commission with the blessing of my lieutenant friend there. And most important than anything else, really, Connie and I were able to get back together again. We had written to each other, well, ever since Connie got back to Glasgow, really, from that first time that she got off the bus. And we'd exchanged quite a few letters. And I had a bit of money from my backpack, so I gave Connie some money and said to her that if she liked, we could become engaged, or if she'd rather, she could buy herself a brooch or something, whatever she'd like to do with the money. And of course, Connie says that on the strength of that, I never really proposed properly. And who am I to argue with that?
I think Connie went with Madge to buy the ring, and she bought a ring with two diamonds, one for her, one for me, she said. But it was important that there was just us two.
The thing that happened next was that I was sent from Inveraray with some other people to the Clyde to be in a camp ashore there near Largs. And as you come up the Clyde, of course, that's on the eastern side, the same side as the towns of Greenock and Gourock. There's an expression that they use in Scotland when they talk about something being lopsided as being all to one side, like Greenock and Gourock. But this was a bit farther down the Clyde, and we were there as the experts in landing craft to maintain several craft. There must have been about 60 to 100 craft there, and I was part of the maintenance crew. We were living under canvas in bell tents, and it was just a temporary camp. It was called HMS Dundonald. They gave it a name, this shore bash, and we were to maintain these craft while they were being exercised on training Canadian boat crews. Now, these boat crews were from the Canadian Navy, and they'd never seen landing craft before, and they were to become familiarized with them because they were going to be used in a landing where the Canadians were to do the actual running of the crafts for this operation. And I think the operation they were being trained for was for North Africa, where the Americans, and I don't know whether they're Canadians or not, were going to be landed to help the 8th Army in North Africa. And they were going to be landed somewhere near Iran. Anyway, to get back to this exercise, the boats were at a little place called Urban. And so we had the same old job of just having to keep them in train. But we began to strike trouble because we found that the crafts were breaking down more frequently than usual. There were all sorts of things happening to them. And the maintenance crews that I belonged to, we were working night and day to keep the craft running. We had all sorts of adjustments upset in the timing of the engines, and bits of the engines missing, and on occasion quite a few of the craft had sugar in the petrol, and the seamen crews that were operating the craft were running them onto rocks. There were quite a lot of rocks near these sandy beaches where they was exercising and landing the troops. But the coxswains of the craft chose to run the craft up on the rocks. And the Canadians' crews were doing this on purpose. Wherever this operation was going to be, they didn't want to go. And so they were wrecking the craft as hard as they could go. And so it was a nightmare of 3 weeks or so, a month, that I was at this place trying to keep this craft running. And, well, by working night and day, we kept them going. We had bent prop shafts and bent propellers and, oh gosh, what a mess. They put holes in the bottom of the craft, and we put copper tingles on them, little sheets of copper tacked on, just to keep the craft afloat and going to do this exercise. And eventually, at the end of this training period, the whole of the people involved, including the maintenance staff, ourselves, and all the Canadians, were lined up. And there were a few hundred personnel there. And the chap who was in charge of the training was a Commodore, a Royal Navy Commodore, Hughes Hallett. His name was Commodore Hughes Hallett. And he stood up on some sort of dais in front of us all and with a microphone. And he gave these Canadians the biggest lecture of their life. And he finished up by saying, you may think that you've displayed an inability to operate these craft, and that you're not capable of going on this operation. But he said, I assure you, you will go. He said, no matter what you do with the craft once you get there, he said, you're going to go on this operation. And he finished off by saying that he was very impressed with the maintenance staff, and that he thanked us for the work and the labour we put into keeping the boats going.
So I found that was my job finished, and back I went to Inverary.
I wasn't long back at Quebec before my commission was granted, and I was promoted to the upper deck as a sub-lieutenant engineer officer, RMBR
uniform. So I went down to Plymouth for that, and I had a couple of weeks in Plymouth on leave, and after I'd been kitted out with all my gear, I had to appear at HMS Victory at Portsmouth and go through a period of training there and be accustomed to being an officer, and used to having all the privileges of being an officer. But I talked to Connie about it, and we decided that the first leave that I got after whenever or however it was, we would get married. And I was to let Connie know so that she could inform the church. And of course, banns used to be called for marriage. I think the idea was to make sure that anybody who wanted to challenge the two people who were getting married, or if there was anything that would prevent them from being married, the banns had to be called for 3 Sundays, I think it was, or so, over a period of time anyway. That would be. So I appeared at HMS Victory and went through no real training at all. I was just there as an individual living in the officers' quarters and in the officers' mess, and Of course, every night we had formal dinners. We went through the ritual of passing the port to the left after the dinner. Apparently, in the old sailing ships, there was very little headroom, and of course also those old wooden sailing ships rolled quite a bit, so it would have been practically impossible for the officers in the wardroom to stand and comfortably toast the king. So the Navy prided itself on this tradition that they were the only members of the armed forces, whether it was Air Force, Army or Navy, that were privileged to sit while they toasted the king.
I think my time at Portsmouth was not really a training period at all in the strict sense of the word. It was more a time for me to be accustomed to wearing the uniform, and the ratings, of course, when you were outside, the sailors would salute me. It wasn't me, actually, they were saluting. It was the cap badge.